are satisfied and they are comfortable with the terms. And then there's something called an allocution, and you can think of that as a conversation between the judge and the defendant, in this case Hunter Biden, to make sure that he understands what he is agreeing to in this plea deal, and that he's had good legal counsel, and that he understands most specifically that there are certain rights that he is waiving under the terms. I can tell you, having covered this for several years now, that this is likely to be a very controversial plea agreement, especially with Republicans on Capitol Hill. Over the last few years, not only in the House but in the Senate, their investigators have raised very serious questions about these business deals with Chinese nationals, as well as this Ukraine energy firm, Burisma. And then more recently, we've had whistleblowers come forward. An IRS whistleblower spoke on the record with CBS News, as well as whistleblowers from the Justice Department have gone to Capitol Hill complaining that this investigation has been slow-walked and that standard investigative procedures have not been followed. So this may just be the beginning of the story in many respects, Gail.
Yeah, it seems so. Catherine, thanks. Let's go to Capitol Hill. Scott McFarlane is there. Scott, what do you expect the reaction to be from Republicans in Congress? You know, as Catherine pointed out, and we all know, Hunter's been a long-time target.
The Congressional House Oversight Committee has launched an ambitious investigation into Hunter Biden. They campaigned on that before they took the majority in January, and this will not stop or mute their investigation. They've been trying to paint a picture of a Justice Department that has been weaponized against Republicans in favor of Democrats, and that has what they characterize as a two-tiered justice system. One for Republicans and one for everybody else. The House Oversight Committee has subpoenaed Hunter Biden's bank records. They've yielded thousands of pages. They've also subpoenaed one of his business partners, Devin Archer, for a deposition. This will not squelch or mute their investigation, but I want to add one legal footnote. We just got a copy of the criminal information filed against Hunter Biden in the federal court in Delaware. A criminal information is what is filed when there is a plea agreement pending. It says in so many words, the defendant, Robert Hunter Biden, knowing that he was an unlawful user of and addicted to a controlled substance, did knowingly possess a firearm, a Colt Cobra. And they have a date in there, Gail. The dates for this crime to which the president's son will be pleading guilty, October 12th, 2018 to October 23rd, 2018, a 2-week finite period of time.
That's very specific. We also know some congressional leaders are still looking into the Biden family. What are they looking for, Scott?
They have made the allegation uncorroborated that the Biden family, not just Hunter Biden, but the president's family, has ties to foreign influence peddlers and have been taking money from foreign influence peddlers, including in China. They have made this part of their broader investigation. This is not just a priority of the House Oversight Investigative Committee. This appears to be the priority of the House Oversight Investigative Committee. That will not change with this news from the federal courthouse in Delaware.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. Senior White House and political correspondent, that would be Ed O'Keefe, joins us now. Ed, good to see you. This is obviously very, very personal for the president. He's outside of D.C. right now, but how has he dealt with the news in this investigation overall?
Gail, good morning to you. Yes, the president's waking up in San Francisco this morning, where he has a series of fundraisers and official events later today. We'll see if he has anything to say for himself. At that point, I'm told to anticipate some kind of statement from the White House here in a little bit, but we don't have it yet. He has been defiant throughout his son's legal problems. Asked about this in an interview in May, he said, quote, "My son has done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him." And when he was asked how the charges might affect his own presidency, the president said, quote, "It impacts my presidency by making me feel proud of him."
Well, it seems like we've seen instances recently where we've seen Hunter physically with President Biden, and deliberately so. It's like the White House wants the public to see the father and son together. What do you make of that, if anything?
Well, it was a signal to us, Gail, that this was nearing some kind of a conclusion, that after several years of personal recovery, rebuilding his family, dealing with his legal matters, he now suddenly was appearing far more frequently alongside his father. I remember most especially in Ireland when the president made that trip in April. He was at the state dinner for the French president. He was at the Easter egg roll with his young son. He was at the Kennedy Center honors sitting just behind behind the president in December. So we have seen him much more, which is not only a signal signal that he himself seemed to be resolving this, but that the president felt that his son could be alongside him for all of this, despite the ongoing legal matter and despite the political pressure that the family is facing after this 5-year ordeal.
So, Ed, do you think that there will be political consequences or an impact to Biden's re-election campaign because of his son's plea deal this morning?
Well, we'll see. Remember, we've seen Republicans for several months now, especially in the wake of the indictment of former President Donald Trump, continue to talk about a so-called two-tiered system of justice, that there are certain people who get off or who get some kind of an agreement like this and others who face prosecution. Now, of course, there are those who cooperate with Justice Department matters and there are those that don't, and that is part of this. But certainly Republicans will continue, it's expected, to make hay of this. As Scott pointed out on Capitol Hill, it certainly remains a big topic of conversation and one that even presidential candidates have been talking about. Ron DeSantis, among others out on the trail, continue to invoke Hunter Biden's name every day on the campaign trail. It is a well-known story among the president's critics or opponents, and we'll see now in the coming hours how Republicans react and how Democrats perhaps rally around the Biden family.
Yeah, we'll be watching. Catherine, back to you before we leave. Why do you think both sides decided to make this deal and make this deal at this time?
Well, Gail, that's an excellent question. My analysis, having covered this for several years, is that the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, David Weiss, was under considerable pressure to try and bring it to a resolution, either charge the president's son or reach some kind of plea agreement. I haven't spoken to a former Justice Department official or tax expert who said to me that it takes 5 years to handle a simple tax and a gun case. In addition, it's not happening in a vacuum. As I mentioned, in recent weeks and months, we've had whistleblowers come forward to Capitol Hill complaining that standard procedures were not followed in this case and that it was slow-walked, using their terms. For the president's son, clearly it brings some closure on the tax issues, and as any plea agreement would, has the effect of limiting future legal exposure. I just want to note in closing that we are still waiting to see the memorandum of the plea agreement. This is the essential document. What's agreed to in the four corners of that document is really what is binding, not what either party hopes or wishes it may include or preclude in the future.
Well, there's certainly more to come. Thank you, Catherine Herridge. Thank you, team, Ed O'Keefe and Scott McFarland. Once again, the breaking news we had this morning was Hunter Biden, the president's son, has just agreed to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor charges of failure to pay income taxes. Now, the younger Biden will also admit he illegally possessed a handgun, which is a felony. This plea deal, as Catherine pointed out, stems from a 5-year federal investigation. Hunter Biden will not face jail time. Instead, he needs to complete probation. Our coverage will continue on CBS News Streaming right now, your local news, and of course, tonight on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Gail King here in New York.
So we're going to pick it up from here and continue following the breaking news about the president's son, Hunter Biden. CBS News has learned that he has reached a federal plea agreement. Hunter Biden plans to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges and admit to illegally possessing a firearm while a drug user. This follows a federal probe into his business dealings. So straight away, we want to bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levison to talk about this. So, you know, we should say that there was a many years investigation into Hunter Biden, his business practices, whether or not he was operating as a foreign agent and not actually, you know, registering as one. At the end of the day, things have whittled down to these 2 tax charges and this question of whether or not he lied on a form when he purchased a firearm. The question was, are you currently using drugs? So my question to you is, what do you make of this filing?
So what I make of the filing, I think you laid it out exactly right, which is there was this very broad investigation. We've heard about it, of course, in the political arena for a very long time now. And oftentimes this happens where there's an investigation into more than is actually charged. And we haven't seen, or I haven't seen, the actual charging document yet. And of course, that is the binding document. That's what they agreed to. But what this indicates is that the Department of Justice thought this is where they could get an agreement. This is where they, if they went to trial, could show proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Will this quiet the critics who say, no, this should have been broader. This should have dealt with failing to register as a foreign agent. I don't think it will quiet the critics. And I think that we will continue to see that the House will hold hearings, that there will additionally be investigations into Hunter Biden. But at least for some, this might answer the question as to why Hunter Biden was not charged with anything where, and we can fill in the blank, others were. So I think for some people, it answers that question, that in fact, Hunter Biden was charged and did come to an agreement with the Department of Justice.
And Catherine, sorry, we have so many correspondents that have been reporting on this, Jessica. But am I to understand that David Weiss, the United States Attorney, is a appointee of the former president of the United States, and because we've talked about the politics surrounding the investigations into Hunter Biden, President Biden or the Department of Justice, could they have removed this attorney if they thought that there was some politics involved here, or not? And if in not doing so, does that signify that the president was trying to distance himself for any investigation into his son?
Any day I might be confused with Catherine Herridge, a good day. But so what does this indicate? Yes, I mean, President Biden, I think, has tried to distance himself as much from the Department of Justice inquiries into both his political rival, former President Trump, that's why a special counsel was appointed, and into his son. And we have said this before in other situations, but I think the further President Biden is away from Merrick Garland, for him, the better. I don't think this is somebody he wants to see across a room. Maybe he wants to wave. But the point here is that President Biden, I think for a whole host of reasons, wants it not just to appear that the Department of Justice is operating independently, but for it actually to operate independently. Could he have said to Merrick Garland, I think this is a situation where we need a special counsel? Of course, that's his prerogative to do so. But in ways big and small, I think President Biden has made a concerted effort to stay out of this investigation, to say over and over again, the Department of Justice needs to operate independently of me, and to ensure that the attorney who oversaw this was not one of his specific political appointees.
All right, Jessica. Is Jessica sticking around with us? I'm asking the producer. Okay, Jessica, you hang tight. We want to bring in our senior White House and political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe, to talk a little bit more about this. I guess first question is, have we heard a response for the White House? But what we really want to get into is the political fallout. But have we heard anything from the White House thus far?
So let's remind our audience that the president's waking up this morning in the Bay Area. He's got another series of events today in and around San Francisco, raising money for his reelection campaign, an event regarding the future of artificial intelligence, meeting with some academics and technology executives there. We have not yet heard from the White House. We're anticipating some kind of written statement from somebody here, whether it's the president, whether it's some other aide speaking on his behalf. I got to say, though, guys, and I think we know this well, having covered this over the course of the last several years, this issue, Hunter Biden, his legal, his personal issues, is the hot potato, is the third rail, is the thing that does not go discussed on or off the record around here for fear of upsetting the president and the first lady and the incredibly tight-knit, close Biden clan. So when or if there is some kind of a statement, it will be carefully vetted through the president and the family before it is given out by somebody, whether, again, it's the president or aides. And again, we should reiterate, the president has been defiant and supportive of his son throughout, perhaps more publicly in recent months, where we've seen Hunter Biden now in public alongside his parents a lot more, whether it was at the Kennedy Center honors in December, whether it was at the French president's state dinner, on the road with the president in Ireland in April. This reporter saw him at the Easter egg roll with his young son, among other times here at the White House. So you get a sense that the family has understood some kind of resolution was coming. And we also know that Hunter Biden himself and his legal team were preparing to sort of hit back, either in the legal or public space, against those that have been so critical of him, have been invoking his name and situation in comparison to what has befallen former President Trump and other Republican figures. And yet, as you said, the political fallout, what's that going to be? Well, look, it's only come in the last few minutes, but we can anticipate Republicans, whether they be up on Capitol Hill or out on the campaign trail, are going to be raising a lot of questions today about the details of this. The fact that it appears to say that the tax charges go away, that the gun thing sort of hangs over him for the next 2 years, but that all other matters are essentially closed. There will be questions from Republican lawmakers and undoubtedly Republican presidential candidates as to why that is. And then there'll be questions about the timing. Why did it take 5 years? Why is this being announced now, just a week after former President Donald Trump was indicted in a federal court in Miami? Is there any connection? Remember, there has been no connection. There's been a special counsel investigating the former president on January 6th related matters, on the classified documents related matters. The Trump-appointed U.S. attorney from Wilmington has been dealing with the Hunter Biden situation since at least 2020, was held over by the Biden administration so as to remove any suggestion of political favoritism or meddling by the White House, and has been allowed to stay on to finish this case and other matters. And now we'll see in the coming days whether a federal judge in Delaware agrees with this plea agreement and the situation is allowed to move forward. So forgive me as I keep checking email and whatnot.
While you do that, Ed, while you do that,
but we don't have it yet.
Okay, while you do that, sorry, you don't have a statement from the White House, Ed?
Not yet. Not
okay,
yet.
All right. While you keep checking email, let me bring in Jessica, and then Ed, I'm going to ask you the same question. There's a statement out from Hunter Biden's lawyer, Jessica Christopher Clark, and he says this, quote, "With the announcement of 2 agreements between my client, Hunter Biden, and the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Delaware, it is my understanding that the 5-year investigation into Hunter is resolved." Now, Jessica, my question to you, is that just spin? And then after you answer, Ed, you pointed out that there may be some howling from Republicans. They're still howling about Whitewater and Benghazi when it comes to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Does it matter if they're howling if the investigation is truly closed? Jessica, you first.
So is it spin? Yes and no. If the attorney has been told by the Department of Justice that this is it, these are the charges, and there's nothing more to come, then that's it for the Department of Justice. But I think the second part of your question is the reason why, yes, maybe this is spin, because we are still investigating Benghazi, we are still investigating Whitewater, and we will still be investigating Hunter Biden, meaning the political arena is entirely different. So when it comes to the House and the House committees, as we said a few moments ago, they will continue to investigate. This will not be the end for them. And we can talk about whether or not there's a legal basis to do so, or whether or not the Department of Justice could always reopen. I think what will be really key for us is if there's any language in the charging documents that indicate to us that the Department of Justice has said, that's it, case closed, we're done. Of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but the House investigations are going to continue, let's be honest.
Ed.
Sure. And because this is just the latest example of it. You mentioned Hillary Clinton's issues, you mentioned the Benghazi situation, you mentioned Whitewater. Already I can see some examples from conservative commentators just in the social media space saying that this is just the latest proof that 2 members of different political parties or their offspring are being treated differently by the nation's justice system. Now, is that a widely held belief among a majority of Americans? Time will tell. But if it's going to be a popular rallying cry on the Republican side, then it's just going to continue to chip away at public confidence in the legal system, in the Justice Department, in the FBI, and in the federal courts at a time when those institutions are engaged in other high-stakes legal matters, including, of course, the situation with the former president. We cannot emphasize it enough. These are separate matters, started on different timelines, overseen by different prosecutors who have discretion. But in the public space, the former president and his allies will continue to argue that they are somehow the same or should be treated the same, even though there have been different responses from the subject of those investigations. The former president alleged to have held on to things that were asked of him by the National Archives and the Justice Department and the FBI, whereas Hunter Biden eventually lawyered up, paid back his taxes, and has been in negotiations apparently, or subject to some kind of an investigation now for 5 years. Certainly there'll be questions about why did it take 5 years? Why wasn't this resolved sooner? Why didn't the prosecutor bring charges earlier on? What were they waiting for? And we'll see if we learn those details. We may never. And it's not necessarily for us to know. because this is a private legal matter, even though he is the son of the president.
Ed,
go ahead, Anne-Marie.
We're going to talk to Scott McFarland, but I just want to ask you this in terms of sort of the political impact, right? So what no doubt some Republicans are going to be trying to do is chip away at President Biden. But as you point out, this narrative is likely to chip away at people's faith in the Justice Department. I am curious, President Biden, and I'm going to use some words that it's going to sound cynical. I'm not attempting to sound cynical, but he's sort of acquired some political currency, if you will, about, his own relationship with his sons, the loss of Beau Biden, and, the fact that he has a son who struggled with addiction, like millions of Americans out there can certainly appreciate. I wonder if Democratic voters even care about this Hunter Biden issue. They already know that, Hunter Biden's the son that's a bit of the problem child for the president. Do they care?
It doesn't come up in polling necessarily. It doesn't come up in our conversations with voters. I think you're right. They understand that this is a father and son who've had a complex relationship since he was a young age, since the death unexpectedly of his mother and his sister in that Christmas time car crash, just weeks after then Senator Biden was elected to the U.S. Senate. It's something that he told our Anthony Mason a few years ago is traumatic and continued to caused great pain for him and was a big factor in the addiction issues that he has faced ever since. And so, there are those certainly that will see it as that private health and behavioral matter. But there are those, of course, on the other side who see this as something more nefarious. And look, one of the things, remember, that often gets talked about is, was Hunter Biden out there doing business deals on his own behalf, but also on behalf of his father, who was then either sitting vice president or former vice president? And we know from our reporting that back in 2014, when the then vice president was visiting Ukraine and dealing with a different political crisis at the time there, and Hunter Biden started making trips over there, that there were Obama administration officials concerned that maybe he was taking advantage of his dad's position for, personal gain. He wouldn't be the first brother, son, daughter, wife, cousin of a political figure to do that. It may just speak to a broader concern that people have about the children of candidates or the children of office holders being able to do certain things given who their parents or their uncles or their brothers and sisters are. And so that's part of a broader conversation. But, as for Democrats, they have, for the most part, rallied around them. And I suspect they will continue to do so. And I also suspect you're going to hear some Democrats today, defenders of the White House, say, look, this is a matter in which the person that was subject to the investigation cooperated, paid back taxes, and has sought resolution. The former president, of course, is in a different situation, in part because of things he refused to do or turn over, as alleged by federal prosecutors.
All right, Ed, thanks. We are going to pivot over to CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland, who've been talking about whether or not this is going to silence the critics. Scott, there's a House committee that has been investigating the Biden family businesses. An interim report came up with not much of anything. But what's the likelihood that this will put an end to that arm of the investigation, the congressional investigation?
Well, nothing is certain in life, but it seems certain this will not quiet the congressional critics of the Biden administration and of the Justice Department's handling of political themed or politically tied prosecutions. Here's the immediate reaction, one from a House member, one from a Senate member on the Republican conference. House Republican Darrell Issa, who used to chair the House Oversight Committee, says, quote, Hunter pleading guilty to tax evasion is only the first crack in the Biden corruption cover-up. Congressman Issa indicating what so many other Republicans have indicated already, that their investigation is broader than Hunter Biden. They're alleging ties between the Biden family and foreign influence peddlers, an allegation that is yet to be corroborated. Now the Senate reaction. Tom Cotton, the Republican senator, says, quote, let's be clear, if anyone without the Biden last name engaged in even a fraction of Hunter's misconduct, they'd face real consequences. Tom Cotton echoing any number of his colleagues who say, again, that there is a two-tiered justice system, that it favors Democrats. This is part of an extended argument some Republicans have made about the investigation and prosecutions of January 6th and the new prosecution in Florida of former President Trump. There are subpoenas that have been issued by the House Oversight Committee for bank records belonging to Hunter Biden. No indication that investigation is going to stop because of this criminal case. There's a broader investigation by congressional investigators into a Hunter Biden business colleague, Devin Archer, who they subpoenaed for a deposition. There's no indication any of this stops because of this plea agreement. In fact, it may accelerate some of the calls from Republicans to dig deeper into the Department of Justice.
Indeed, Scott. Thank you very much. I would just tell everyone that, of course, we're going to continue to cover this story at the top of the hour. CBS News senior investigative reporter Catherine Herridge is going to be joining the stream with an update for us, so stick around.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated against?
I just worked harder.
The future of an ever-evolving U.S. military when we go person to person.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where.
CBS News has been following this story. Camilla, why is the government relying on these devices to track migrants?
But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Doctor, why are federal health advisors focusing on this specific pill for contraception? And knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. I'm John Dickerson. See you on Prime Time, streaming free everywhere.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
He started out as a fun-loving party boy, but the alcohol got the better of him. What I envisioned was him being in some sort of medical facility. I just thought, what a great candidate for them to learn about the results of alcoholism and what it does to a body. But his body was sold to the military, specifically used as a crash test dummy in a simulated Humvee explosion. I was devastated. I had the box. I don't know if they were his ashes or not. I just held it as tight as I could, and I just told him how sorry I was.
Body Brokers, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
After nearly 4 decades of March Madness, this sports broadcasting legend is stepping away from his role in covering the NCAA basketball tournament. Jim Nantz on his fondest memories and what's next when we go person to person.
The news doesn't have to always be depressing. It can be uplifting.
After the tragic loss of beloved newsman Tim Russert, his son went on a worldwide journey to find himself.
I struggled with his grief for a long time.
How Luke Russert is honoring the legacy of his father when we go person to person.
So we are continuing to follow breaking news about the president's son, Hunter Biden. CBS News has learned that he has reached a federal plea agreement. Hunter Biden plans to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges and admit to illegally possessing a firearm while a drug user. This follows a federal probe into his business dealings. Joining us now is CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Talk a little bit about what we are learning. So for the people who are just sort of getting up to speed, because this information sort of broke about 30 minutes or so ago. Catherine, what can you tell us? Give us the lay of the land.
Sure. So, Anne-Marie and Vlad, the way it unfolded this morning is that these 3 documents were filed with the Delaware court, and it confirmed that the lawyers for Hunter Biden, as well as the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, have reached a plea agreement in this long-running tax case. As you indicated, there are the 2 charges, willful failure to pay federal income tax, and then the possession of a gun by a drug user, which would normally be a felony, but based on the paperwork, this will be sent to a diversion program. And if Hunter Biden follows the terms that are laid out in the plea agreement, it would have the effect of essentially wiping the slate clean of that violation. What we don't know at this point is what's called the memorandum of the plea agreement. This is the document through which in the 4 corners lays out the understanding between both of the parties. So Hunter Biden, his lawyers, and the U.S. Attorney. This is an incredibly important document, and it will be filed sometime before he has a court appearance where a judge will decide whether to accept this plea agreement. And the reason I say it's so important is the central question here is whether this is the end of the road, right? In the investigation of Hunter Biden and any other members of the Biden family that were doing business with him, or whether this agreement is very narrow in its scope. It's just the taxes, it's just the gun possession, and other items, other potential violations may be on the table in the future.
And remind our audience, Catherine, of the background to this investigation.
Well, Vlad, this investigation began as a review, and then it transitioned into a formal criminal investigation as early as 2018. So it's been running for 5 years. As you and Anne-Marie mentioned, it's been much broader in scope, looking at allegations of money laundering, violations of foreign lobbying laws. That's called FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. It requires American citizens who are lobbying on behalf of foreign governments or foreign nationals to register with the U.S. government, be transparent about what they're doing. And then also tax evasion. Tax evasion is the intent not to pay tax and to essentially hide the money. And that in itself is a felony. There was COVID in the midst of this investigation, which of course slowed it down like many other federal probes. But this U.S. attorney has been under a lot of pressure to either indict, close, or reach some kind of plea agreement, because I've not spoken to former Justice Department officials or tax experts who, in their experience, have seen a tax and a gun case take 5 years to reach some kind of resolution.
And then what about this investigation into his business dealings and whether or not he needed to disclose his foreign relationships with the Department of Justice? Is that done and over with? Has that been put to bed now, or
That's a
does
great
that
question.
continue?
It's all going to depend, Anne-Marie, on what's in this memorandum of the plea agreement. Again, what's within the 4 corners of that document. That is the governing understanding of the 2 parties. When you have plea agreements, each party may have some wishful thinking about what it's going to mean in the future, but none of that matters. It's just what's in black and white on that document, and that will be submitted to the judge for review prior to this court appearance, which could happen within days or perhaps as early as later this week or even next week. And I would just say the judge has to approve this deal. The 2 parties have. It's unusual for a judge to intervene and sort of upset the apple cart, but it's happened in the past. The judge has to be comfortable with the terms given the violations the defendant is accepting guilt for executing.
All right, Catherine Herridge, as always, you're reporting instrumental in our reporting here at CBS News on this story. Thank you very much, as always. For more, let's bring in our senior White House and political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe. Ed, you're hearing from the White House.
That's right, Vlad and Marie. Good to see you again. White House issued a very short statement from the President and First Lady just a while ago. A spokesman passing along, quote, "The President and First Lady love their son and support him as he continues to rebuild his life. We will have no further comment." So that is the official line, public line from the White House and from the First Family, at least, on this matter. We should remind folks the President is waking up this morning in San Francisco. He is set to hold an event with academics and tech executives regarding the future of artificial intelligence out there before attending fundraisers for his re-election campaign. He's spending the night there in the Bay Area again tonight before flying back here tomorrow to host the Prime Minister of India later in the week, so he's got a jam-packed schedule. We will see over the course of today how close reporters get to him to see if he has anything else to say on camera about this. I suspect, having tracked the way he has responded to things like this in the past, he'll say very little or wait until his son has actually appeared before that judge in Delaware and this is indeed resolved before weighing in otherwise, because they have been so sensitive to the accusations of political favoritism. Aides have gone to great lengths to remind us that the president has never, according to them, discussed this with the Attorney General, never discussed the matter involving his son or any other member of his family, that he kept in place the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney for Delaware, who had worked for Attorneys General Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr and stayed on to work for Merrick Garland and continue this investigation so as to remove any suggestion that he was being removed because he was investigating Hunter Biden. And we know that the President and Attorney General are very rarely in each other's company, at least publicly, or that we know about, and are known to just be discussing broader political priorities for the administration or at cabinet meetings, never privately the way, say, Barack Obama and Eric Holder used to hang out together as friends in addition to colleagues, or as former President Trump might have spoken privately with Jeff Sessions back in the day. So, we again will wait and see how the president is asked about this later and throughout the rest of the week. But for now, that's all they have to say.
But you know how some people consume the news, right? They read the headlines, they stick around for the breaking news title, and so they're going to hear Hunter Biden pleads guilty and maybe not even hear the rest of this. How could this impact the president's reelection campaign?
Well, and let's clarify what you just said. He agreed to a plea deal, which doesn't necessarily means he pleaded guilty to all of these charges. Remember, he's acknowledging the gun possession, not necessarily pleading guilty to something quite yet. And again, it all remains to be seen what the judge ultimately decides to do. So let's just clarify that.
Yeah.
How will it affect the reelection campaign? Look, Republicans talk about this every day. Noun, verb, Hunter Biden. Where's Hunter? Two-tier justice system. It will continue to be fodder on the Republican presidential campaign trail for sure. We will wait and see how they respond throughout the day today, whether it's former President Trump himself, or other candidates who will be out and about. There aren't many holding public events today necessarily. And then, we'll see broadly how the conservative media space continues to respond to this. There are some already suggesting this is just the latest example of a broken justice system, a Justice Department that needs to be completely hollowed out and rebuilt, as some presidential candidates like Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, and others have said needs to happen. We do have a statement, in fact, from the super PAC that backs former President Trump, and it says in part, Biden's Justice Department is cutting a sweetheart deal with Hunter Biden in order to make their bogus case to get Trump appear fair. Meanwhile, Biden's DOJ continues to turn a blind eye to the Biden family's extensive corruption and bribery scheme. The American people need President Trump back in office to appoint a truly independent special prosecutor that will finally bring justice. So that's an example of the kind of Republican response we're going to probably see throughout the day. And of course, officially, House Republicans are going to continue to use the official taxpayer-funded levers at their disposal to continue investigating this matter, seeking information from the Justice Department about it, as they have been doing so since they retook control of the House earlier this year.
And we should just remind people that, there has been an investigation into Hunter Biden's business practices since 2018 in Ukraine, in China, in Kazakhstan. It hasn't turned up evidence of wrongdoing thus far. And in terms of the congressional investigation, they put out an interim report. They also couldn't find evidence of wrongdoing. So, at this point, it's not like there's evidence out there that's being ignored. They're trying. They're just not finding it.
Exactly. I think it's a good way of describing it. And those investigations will continue. And now, inevitably, there will be more questions asked and more information sought from the Justice Department about the resolution of this matter.
All right, Ed, I think you're standing by while we continue to report this out. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian, who's joining us now to talk about this. So you heard a little bit from Ed there, and in our last hour from Scott McFarland. Nicole, what are you hearing from congressional Republicans and your sources?
Well, we are starting to get trickling out of reaction from Republicans. A few Senate Republicans have weighed in, such as Florida's Rick Scott, who called this a slap on the wrist. Tennessee's Marsha Blackburn saying that this is a sweetheart deal with no jail time. You also have over in the House, Congressman Bob Good, a member of the House Freedom Caucus, saying that Hunter Biden's, quote, apparent crimes are a diversion from the real issues. So I would expect that we will continue to hear similar lines of reaction from Republicans as the day progresses and as people start to digest this news. And as the points have been raised by Ed and others, this will likely continue to stoke Republicans' desire to continue to pursue a line of investigation, not only into Hunter Biden, but the broader Biden family that has really been the underpinning of several investigations here on Capitol Hill, which are only likely to pick up steam in light of this news.
Yeah, in fact, let's sort of remind people of what's happening in terms of the House investigation. That this was an investigation into the Biden family business deals, if you will.
That's right. The primary investigation right now has been centered in the House Oversight Committee, which has really been focused on this since the start of the new Republican-controlled House here in Congress. And so, primarily, this committee has been tasked and looking into the Biden family's both domestic and international business dealings. And so, for instance, they have obtained thousands of pages of financial records related to the Biden family, as it pertains to Hunter Biden more specifically. And more recently, what we saw is that the committee recently got a briefing from the FBI on what is called an FD 1023 form. And this is a form that was redacted by the FBI that contained information from a human confidential source. And so there has been some contention over this document, so much so that at one point the chair of the committee, James Comer, had threatened to hold the FBI director, Christopher Wray, in contempt of Congress if his agency didn't turn over this document. And so what happened was the FBI not only briefed Chair Comer, Ranking Member Jamie Raskin on this particular document, which, has details from this source about an alleged bribery scheme involving the Biden family. And so, while Republicans contend that this source is very highly credible, Democrats feel that this is more of a debunked testimony, that this is just someone who is likely spreading conspiracy theory. So there's been some discrepancies between what exactly is contained in this form, how legitimate this evidence may be, and again has sparked an entire fight really among the committee. And just recently the entire committee had access to this particular document. And the next steps from here is that we do expect the committee, and the chair has made clear that he will likely call in more witnesses related to this particular case in terms of their broader probe, looking into some of the financial dealings of the Biden family, including potentially Hunter Biden's ex-business partner and associate who worked with him on this Ukrainian energy company, which is kind of at the center of part of this investigation.
My guess, Nicole, is that this news breaks at an opportune time for Republicans who don't have to answer a lot of questions about President Trump's appearance yesterday night on Fox News. So I wonder if in almost every instance you're hearing a lot of Republicans responding to this, but not to things that the president, the former president, said yesterday evening. And my second guess is that a lot of Democrats aren't probably saying much right now.
Well, it is a bit of a split screen moment, but as reporters, that doesn't mean that we stop asking questions about this. As we have seen in the response following the Trump indictment, that many Republicans have been pointing the finger at President Biden in terms of his handling of classified documents, which remains under investigation. But others have also pointed to this investigation into the Hunter Biden and the Biden family, and really, in their view, getting up upset with media coverage, feeling that media isn't giving this case involving Hunter Biden enough attention, and that all the focus has been on the former president. So to your point, perhaps this allows them the opportunity to turn the page, but also, both of these cases are front and center. I mean, we just learned in terms of the Trump case that will go to trial in mid-August. So, this is very political in nature on both sides. In terms of Democrats, they have largely steered clear not only of the Trump indictment, but also with respect to Hunter Biden. And as I mentioned, in terms of this fight that has emerged among the House Oversight Committee, there have been a lot of concerns among Democrats that this particular case is being overly politicized. So while they may be making similar arguments about different cases, it will unlikely stop the spin that we get from both sides of the aisle as both of these stories develop.
All right, Nicole, Ed, Catherine, thank you so much, everyone. Of course, we're going to be staying on this story. When we come back, CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson will be breaking down this case and the charges for us. So stay with us.
It's a history-making meeting. 4 extraordinary women who are all 4-star generals and admirals.
How did you deal with being discriminated against?
I just worked harder.
The future of an ever-evolving U.S. military when we go person to person.
Stories start with the who, what, when, and where.
CBS News has been following this story. Camilla, why is the government relying on these devices to track migrants?
But it's why it's important to you that matters most. Doctor, why are federal health advisors focusing on this specific pill for contraception? And knowing what to ask is how you open the door to a deeper understanding. I'm John Dickerson. See you on Prime Time, streaming free everywhere.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
He started out as a fun-loving party boy, but the alcohol got the better of him. What I envisioned was him being in some sort of medical facility. I just thought, what a great candidate for them to learn about the results of alcoholism and what it does to a body. But his body was sold to the military, specifically used as a crash test dummy in the simulated Humvee explosion. I was devastated. I had the box. I don't know if they were his ashes or not. I just held it as tight as I could, and I just told him how sorry I was.
Body Brokers, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News Streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
After nearly 4 decades of March Madness, this sports broadcasting legend is stepping away from his role in covering the NCAA basketball tournament. Jim Nantz on his fondest memories and what's next when we go person to person.
So we are continuing to follow breaking news. The president's son, Hunter Biden, has reached a plea deal in a federal investigation. So let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joining us now. So Jessica, for some people, they're just going to be kind of waking up and hearing the news and not knowing the details, even though we've been covering it for the last hour. So, give us a breakdown of, what you make of this filing.
So I think the breakdown is what's included and what's not included. This is about tax evasion. It's about so-called addict in possession of a gun, meaning Hunter Biden is being charged with having a gun and lying on a form to say, I'm not currently using drugs, where federal prosecutors suspected, no, that is not correct, given his erratic behavior at the time. That's an interesting charge because it's actually been used for some of the people involved in January 6th, who the Department of Justice maybe didn't get on other charges. And we've seen some of the people there who have been who have pled guilty to that charge. So it's being used a little bit more frequently than we saw in the past. But as I said a moment ago, this is about what's included, which is taxes and a gun charge, and what's not included, which is the idea that Hunter Biden should have registered as a foreign lobbyist, or that there was something illegal about his business dealings. I will say the other big what is not included is anything that relates to the current president. These are charges about Hunter Biden, about his conduct. These are not charges about the current president. And as we've talked about, the two big questions are, when we actually see the document and we see the memorandum of understanding between Hunter Biden and the Department of Justice, does it clearly state, this is it, this is the end of the road? We have looked at whether or not Hunter Biden should have registered as a foreign agent, a foreign lobbyist, and we're done. No charges will be brought. Or does it leave the door open for future charges? Of course, the other big question is, what does this mean outside the legal arena in the House? We know that there is a House committee investigating Hunter Biden and President Biden. I think the answer to that is easier, which is it probably means full steam ahead, regardless of what happened today in this plea agreement.
And so no jail time for Hunter Biden at all, as far as we understand.
That's right. If the judge accepts this deal, there is no jail time. There's probation and there is a diversion program for that gun charge. So there's probation for the 2 tax charges, 2 misdemeanor tax charges, and again, a diversion program. And I believe that Hunter Biden has to stay drug-free for 24 months in order for that charge dealing with possessing a gun and lying and saying, I am not currently using drugs, that in order for that to stick, for the diversion to be the proper punishment, he has to agree to stay drug-free.
And yeah, the question on the form is, are you currently using drugs? Which to me is kind of, it's easy to interpret it in many ways. I don't know if it's the best question, but that is the question. So how quickly could an arraignment come after today's news?
It could come this week. So arraignments can happen very quickly. It could be next week. As we've all had a quick education dealing with other cases, federal judges have enormous discretion over their calendar and they can set things quickly, or we could see it next week. Again, it looks like the documents are all in order, so I don't see a reason for this to go longer than a week.
All right, Jessica, thanks for sticking around with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to pivot over to CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland, because, of course, there is a whole political sort of side to this. And, you know, in addition to the Justice Department investigation, the House has been investigating the business dealings of the Hunter family. What are you hearing on the Hill today?
Well, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee just announced his committee's investigation into the Biden family will continue. This changes and stops nothing for House Republican Oversight Committee members, but it's noticeable in the initial hours of this news how quickly Republicans are tying this news about Hunter Biden to the federal prosecution of Donald Trump. Senator Rick Scott, who Nicole Killian quoted earlier, says that it's a slap on the wrist for Hunter Biden, while Joe Biden continues to, quote, hunt down his top political opponent. Then there's the statement from Republican Congressman Lance Gooden of Texas, who says Hunter will see 0 days in jail, even though he committed many crimes. Trump faces 450 years over a paperwork dispute. That's the statement today from Lance Gooden, Republican from Texas. So you can see Republicans synthesizing this arrangement, this agreement between Hunter Biden's attorneys and the Department of Justice and what Donald Trump is facing in Florida. And we had that news earlier today. that the judge in Fort Pierce, Florida, Judge Eileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, has set an initial trial date in that federal criminal prosecution of the former president. The initial trial date is August 14th. That is quite soon. That is an ambitious time frame, not likely to stick. There will almost certainly be calls for delay, pushing that back months, potentially many months. But in the same morning, we get the news of Hunter Biden and we get a trial date for Donald Trump. Perhaps it's no surprise Republicans in Congress are tying these two together as part of a larger argument, Anne-Marie and Vlad, that they say shows a two-tier justice system, one that favors the Democrats.
And so those investigations, Scott, the American people are going to be wondering. There's a legal investigation that is happening with the U.S. attorney, and then there's this political investigation happening within the halls of Congress. What kind of teeth do those investigations have?
Well, it's always possible, Vlad, that a federal prosecution can throw some wrench in the gears of a congressional investigation. It's always possible that there are similar witnesses or the same witnesses for both investigations, some of whom maybe stopped talking to the congressional investigators because they're now talking to the feds. That's been the reality since this began. This congressional investigation, though, was a top priority of Republicans as they campaigned for office in 2022. And as soon as they took over the gavels, the chairmanships of these committees who have jurisdiction, including the House Oversight Committee, they've made it clear today they are full throttle ahead trying to expand this investigation beyond Hunter Biden. They have made allegations that are uncorroborated that Joe Biden has been the recipient of some largesse or some benefit from foreign influence peddlers. They still have to show their work on that allegation, and at this point they haven't, but they've made clear those investigations continue.
Well, Scott, this committee has released an interim report already. And I've been saying this, throughout the morning, that what they failed to do is find any evidence of wrongdoing. But can you kind of talk a little bit more about what the interim report has found so far and why they believe that there's more to investigate?
Yeah, a lot of this hinges on a phrase called suspicious activity reports, which are financial reports that are flagged by the greater financial system. That's a term that maybe seem loaded to some people, that sometimes very innocuous, benign things are the subject of suspicious activity reports, but it's certainly clear to us that Republicans have hung their hats on that hook for quite some time. They've also subpoenaed thousands of pages of bank records and alleged improprieties, some of which may be reflected by this plea agreement that Hunter Biden's about to enter into. But it's clear they're going bigger than this, that they have sights set beyond Hunter Biden, though they have also subpoenaed one of his former business partners, Devin Archer. All of this, though, is getting criticism from Democrats that Republicans are, to a degree, weaponizing their oversight abilities and capabilities to try to damage Joe Biden on the eve of his presidential re-election campaign. So you see it going both ways. This is just a Rorschach test of your politics. Which side is weaponizing the levers of power to try to malign a future candidate? It's clearly a case where both sides see the other as using weapons and each side viewing themselves as the victim.
Indeed, Scott. Scott McFarland, thank you so much. So we have a lot more news. There's other things going on in the world. Vlad and I are going to be talking to a search and rescue expert about the missing mini sub that disappeared on the way to see the wreckage of the Titanic. So stay with us for that conversation.
An original documentary from CBS reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?